Hi there, it's COMP123 and it's week 4, lesson 4, part 1. And today we're going to be talking about inheritance. It shows assignment 2 is supposed to be handed out today too, or today or tomorrow, and it's going to happen tomorrow. So tomorrow you're going to get your assignment 2. It's going to be around inheritance, so just as a high-level plan, as I plan my classes, we'll hand that out. But today I want to talk about a couple of things. One of them, because your assignment 1 is due Friday, is GitHub. These people are saying, hey, I don't know how to use GitHub, and how can you put it on the assignment? We never taught us how to use it, so let's do that thing. So first, of course, you have to sign up, and you should have already signed up to GitHub because you have that sign up thing, right? When you sign up, you got to create your new repository, which we're going to do now, right? So let's do this thing. Let's join me here on Visual Studio. We'll go on the Visual Studio side. And I'll just kick off a new project. And let's connect it up to GitHub and all that kind of fine stuff. So the first thing we got to do, again, like I said, and it's on the PC side here, is we're going to go to GitHub on the PC side, and I'm going to create a new repository. I'm just go to new, and my new repository is going to be called COMP. Actually, let me go back because you guys didn't see that. So here, on this little plus sign next to my account name, I'm going to click this plus button, and it's going to give me an option to go new repository, right? Now, repository, what is that thing anyway? It's a location where we're going to store our files, and it's going to help us keep track of all of our changes, right, as we go forward, right? So here's my account name, and I'm going to call the repository COMP123. And if you notice, it has to be, I can't put spaces in the name. I can't do this, right? Because this isn't oh, well, somehow it'll add the name. But you should make it so it's a URL, a functional URL name. So COMP123 and today's lesson 4. So I'll use that as the repository name. Yeah, follow along, right? So I'm going to click Create Repository here. And if you notice, there's this green link. I'm going to see if we can bring it a little higher for you guys to see this green link on the left hand side of the screen, right? This green link right here is what you need to click to create your repository. When you do that, you get an automatically generated page by GitHub, and it's going to show you the name of your account. In this case, it's my last name. And the new repository link, COMP123-lesson 4, right? And then down here, there's going to be a URI, is what it's called. And what you can do is you need to copy this thing and use it. Now, we don't need to copy it right away because we need to create our structure for our new project over here, right? So now we have a repository, but it's empty. And when I say empty, I mean there's a placeholder for a repository that we can put together right now. But right now it's just hanging out on the web. So again, think about version control. When we talk version control or source control, really it's part of change management, right? And what we're doing here is we want to keep track of all of our files, because one of the biggest problems we have when we're programming is the dog ate my computer. I lost my house burned down, and I lost my code. It worked before, and now it doesn't work. I don't know what I did. Those kind of things. All those are the questions we do as programmers. We have all these issues that come up. Or I want to collaborate with somebody else. I want to work with somebody else on this project, but I don't know how to connect with them. Should I use Dropbox? Should I use something else? What can I use to collaborate with them in real time? And Git has been around for a while now. Now, Git, the original Git was actually a command line tool that we used. I'll give you a bit of background. I actually did this little tutorial for people in my other courses, so I might as well bring it up for you too, since, hey, you guys aren't chopped liver, right? So I'm going to this other course I did. So for people who don't have me for the other course, you're going to get a preview of what I did for them for Git. Don't worry about the course code. I'm just going to skip through it so you guys get what the other guys got, because I use Git with everything, right? Yes.
Would this eliminate the need for a USB if you want to transfer files from your desk here to your laptop at home? Or
Yes. You don't need a USB with this. All right. So again, let's talk about version control, right? A little bit. Think about if you could create a snapshot for your code, right? So you have your code and you're working on it, and yet, you want to keep track of every change that you make. Imagine in the past it was done by hand. You have to save your code over and over again. And that was okay for like 1 or 2 files, but when you're dealing with something like Visual Studio, which is a beast, right? You have a bunch of little other files that go along with your code. Property files and assembly information files and all the other stuff that goes along with your compile, right? So imagine if you had to keep track of all that. Every single time you made a new version, you had to copy and paste into a new version. So your code might be called your assignment number 1 as an example. Assignment number 1, version 0.1. Assignment number 2, version 0.2, a new directory. Assignment number 1, version 0.3, and so on. And keep going over and over and over again until you might have 50 directories of different versions. Who knows how long it might take you. Maybe assignment number 1 is difficult. And it's tough to track. It means you don't know which file exactly changed. You might have 1, 2, 3, 10 files that changed, right? And you don't know. Well, this GitHub keeps track of everything for you. So think about when we do a snapshot. In Git terminology, it's called a commit. All right. Think about it as it's associated. This revision, if you will, is associated with a timestamp, and it gives you a little bit of its own hash code to differentiate one commit or one snapshot compared to another. That's what it does, right? So originally, Git, back in the day, it was created in 2005, and it was what we like to call a repository. It wasn't just a folder, but a place where we could keep track of all your changes. So Git at the time was only command line. So you needed to use some kind of, on the PC, it was you can use command prompt with some the extra library that was installed in your system. On Mac OS 10, it's native, so you can actually use Git today, and it's part of OS 10, right? And Linux, it also has Git installed native, right? The native capabilities of the command line, right? But then, as cloud computing became more popular and bandwidth, in terms of services increased, they came up with this web-based hosting service called GitHub, right? And so just like the command line tool, which is local to your system, they created a cloud-based system that you could sync up with, a remote that you could sync up with. So basically what you do is you take your local repository, your local folder that has extra attributes attached to it that make it so that you can track your files. This is on your local folder, and you connect to the remote folder on the web, which is offered up by GitHub. Now, it's a free service if you sign up, as long as you create public repositories. If you want to make private repositories, then you got to pay. So really, 3 good reasons to use Git. One of them, and the main one that I want to focus on with us, is version control. So keeping track of your version of your code from one version to the other. You start working on it today, and then you put it down, you go back to it, and then you make another change, and you put it down, and you go back to it again. You keep doing that over and over again. You don't work on your code in one sitting, usually, especially if it's a larger piece of code. And what happens is sometimes between the times you sit down, something goes wrong. Or maybe something goes right, but you want to keep track of all these changes. That's one of the reasons why we use GitHub. The other one is keep your code in one place, just like you said. Instead of carrying around a USB key, or if you have more than one network drive or whatever, you can house all of your code in GitHub, and you can always sync up the stuff that's already on GitHub with your local system, right? And we'll talk about how to do that. And the third real reason, which is the best reason, is collaboration, right? And self-marketing. The best way to get noticed is if you go to an interview and you have a GitHub account and you say, hey, here's my code. Take a look, this is the stuff that I've been doing, I've been working on. I've got a few repositories you can check out. And so you can prove to the other person that, hey, I do coding, man. I use GitHub for everything. You can go online, look at my code, and you can inspect it, see what it looks like. And it makes a good segue for a conversation and an interview, right? So I think this is definitely something from a social aspect that makes sense for us as coders, as developers. Okay, so again, there's a couple things we can do. One, you can do things strictly with the built-in tools. I'm just going to shift over here to Visual Studio. There's some built-in tools in Visual Studio we can use to kind of link up with GitHub. So if I create a new, let's just do this together now. I'm going to go create a new project, right? And it's going to be a C# project, right? And I'm going to create this, and it's going to be called COMP123, and of course we just called it lesson 4, right? Now if I want to be just the same as this one, it was lesson 04, just to be accurate. Okay, so there's lesson 04, and on the bottom it says, hey, do you want to add your stuff to source control? This little checkbox here, I always check it on because I use source control for everything, right? So now it might give you the option to say add to source control instead of GitHub. You might have that option. But once you create this the first time, it'll say, which one do you want? Do you want Team, Foundation Server, or do you want Git? And the answer is always got to be Git for us. And there's another little checkbox that's going to come up. Now, I'm not here right now, but that'll show basically if you want to make this your default version control system. And so the answer is yes. You probably want to make Git for now in this class the default. So I'm going to continue on, assuming that you already have that.
Sorry, how do you get it to
Okay.
source control?
Let's try that again then. I'll just do the same thing without source control. Let's do it afterwards, okay? So here I've turned it off. Create new Git repository. I've turned it off. We'll do it after. You can do both before and after. So let's do it after. Let's say it was an afterthought, right? You didn't think you wanted to link up to Git, but now you do, right? I'm going to press OK. So I'm not linked up to it right now. I'm going to press OK again, and it's going to create my basic project. Now in here is where COMP123 is where I'm going to have all my new stuff, right? This is where I'm going to have my new C# stuff. So I'm going to say, if I want to add a new item, right? And in this particular case, I want to create instead of web, I want to create a new class, right? Which is this first class. Then I can do that, right? I can say my new class or my class, example class, or maybe we'll call it GitHub class. How about that? GitHub class, right? And then .cs, of course, and press add, right? What this is going to do is going to add my GitHub class into my files, right? So this is the actual file, and it starts off, it gives me this first public class, right? And now it doesn't really matter if I start like this or if I do it the other way. This is just an example, so don't worry about which system I'm using here. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so I've got my stuff, and let's add some comments here. So this is just a GitHub test. That's what we'll do. We'll do this a couple times, okay? So this is a GitHub test, and I want to connect. Well, I have this Team Explorer window over here, right, that I would normally connect with, but I don't have a Git repository. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to there's two levels here. There's the solution level, and there's the project level, right? If I go to the solution level and right-click, right, you're going to get an option that says Add Solution to Source Control. Yeah? Right-click on the solution, not the project. This is the project. This is the solution. Right-click on the solution. Add Solution to Source Control. You don't got? Maybe it's because you've got professional.
Well, I'm using the ultimate from the school computer.
You should have that.
Well, but actually, when I did it because you didn't check the box. I did.
Oh, so you're on. So if you don't have it, it looks like this. It says Add Solution to Source Control, and then it's going to say, now my default is Git, so it's already added me in, right? Otherwise, for you, it'll come up with this little box, little dialog that says, do you want Git or Team Foundation, right? You want Git. Okay, so now I'm connected to it. And then in Team Explorer, I can go to the top here. There's some buttons. One of them is this Home button, right? So I'm going to click Home, and now in my project, I have several options. One of them is called Changes, right? So I've got some changes here, right? Because I just added this file, this CS file, right? And we're going to do this again, don't worry. Even if I'm going too fast, we'll do it one more time, just so we're all together. And then plus it's recorded online, right? Okay, so here's all these changes that we have here. And these are all the tracked changes, right? Okay, so I'm going to make a commit. Let me go back and talk about what a commit is. Actually, I'll do that first. When I do a commit, I do a snapshot. Think about myself taking a picture of my code, right? Like I'm almost like when you do an update for Windows, right? It asks you if you want to do a stopping point or a restore point, right? Well, this is kind of what we're doing here. We're almost creating a restore point for our code, right, online. So the commit is that, and you got to add in a commit message. The commit message describes your restore point or stopping point or snapshot, whatever you want to call it. All right. So in this particular case, I would say something like created basic project structure. Or you could say something like this, which is very common, first commit or initial commit. But it's some kind of message that tells the the viewer of your code why you're making this snapshot, why you're doing it. So this is the first one. So I'm going to use initial commit and click on the commit button. Once I've done that, right, I've got my initial commit, I can go back to the home button, all right, and then there's this space for unsynced commits, right? This is this choice that we're going to make. And notice there's like this yellow space here that says, hey, what's the URL of this empty Git repo that you can hook up with, right? Well, it's over here, right? Because I just created my repo online, and inside my repo I have this URI that's being shared with me, right? So if I take this, right-click and copy, or click this little button, which says copy to clipboard, it'll take this and copy the link to clipboard. Now I can go back to Visual Studio, and I can right-click and paste or Control-V. There's my link right now, right? When I click Publish, it'll connect these files with my online GitHub account. Let me check that out. And there it is. It says the origin remote has been added and the current branch has been published. Now if I go back to my site here it is for COMP123, this lesson 4, and I refresh, now you see I've got these extra files. So this is live. You can track me live. If you go on this, if you just follow me, if you go to my site, my account name, and find me, COMP123 lesson 4, this is me. You can actually track my files. So that's one way to do it, right? Like we did it that way. If you notice, when we created our GitHub account, and I'm just going to go in there, and let's say you're not someone who likes to use Visual Studio. You don't want to connect, or you're having trouble connecting with Visual Studio. Well, some of you do. Some of you will have issues connecting with Visual Studio, and you want to use a helper app. Well, there is a helper app that GitHub gives you, right? I'm going to go in there right now as incognito. You can also do this by logging out. So I'm going to create a new incognito window in Chrome, and I'm going to go back to GitHub, right? If I do that, I get this, hey, sign up for GitHub thing like we did before when you first signed up. Well, if you scroll down, for each of your systems, there is the easiest way to GitHub on Windows, to use GitHub, is to download this GitHub for Windows, an app that you can connect with GitHub, right? I recommend it if you're having issues with Windows. Sometimes this will fix your problems, because what happens is it also gives you the Git command line for Windows as well, right? So you download and install this little program, and then it looks like this when you finally install it. I'm just going to kick it off here. Here's my GitHub for Windows, right? Now what you can do with it is you can look for your system to scan for repositories that are already there. And I've already created a repository in my system. I know they're in GitHub, my GitHub link. So I'm going to go to Options, and in here it says scan for repositories, and I can tell the the program which path to check for my repositories. And I know I keep my stuff in a local folder called GitHub under my documents. Right, this is where it's just a folder in my account, on my system. It's local to my computer. So again, there's two repositories here. There's a repository which is inside a folder in my computer, and there's the remote repository on GitHub in the cloud. All right. First, you need to make a commit or save a snapshot to the local folder in your system, and then you connect or you sync up with the remote folder on GitHub. Okay. So there's a two-step process here. Well, multi-step process. Let's put it that way. So if I scan for repositories in this folder, it'll pick up my new repository, which I'm going to just uncheck all this so I can check it manually, which is called COMP123 lesson 4. Right? So here it is. Right? And if I add this in, and this is with the tool downloaded that I just got from GitHub, right? And I click update, what I actually do is get lesson 4, and if you notice, I've got these two commits. This initial commit to add default git ignore, right, which is generated by Visual Studio, and this initial commit that I made 4 minutes ago. So it's here in this local program that I've created, this little app, as well as, right? It's here because this is where I've done my Visual Studio, and of course online. If I go online, it's here as well. If I go to my commit history, which is, you can find it here in your repository. If I click commits, I can see the same commit history, initial commit to add git ignore and git attributes files. And if I go local, it says the same thing. Here's my initial commit and the initial commit to add default git ignore. So if you're having trouble with Visual Studio and connecting with Visual Studio, you can certainly download this app, and it's available for both Mac OS X and Windows, right? Linux has other connection tools you can use as well, but they're not the same. Okay, so let's try and do another change. So I've added this little, this little change here, GitHub test, and I've got my public class, right, which doesn't do anything right now because again I'm just using it as a test. And let's say I want to add another line that just kind of does a console, dot write line, right? So I'm going to do a console, type console, dot. And I'm not getting any code hinting, that's okay. But I'm just going to do a console.write. And if everything is good, and if I'm not right, if I don't know what it is, I can go simply use the system.console, it's the same thing. And then from there, I can do whatever from there, just like we normally do, right? Well, let's say I add something and it doesn't work. Like, for example, console.write, like this, okay? And it's giving me an error. And I don't know what it is, but I save it anyway, okay? It doesn't matter what I do within my Visual Studio environment, right? If I make this change and I put it up on GitHub, I go back to Team Explorer, it's a mistake, right? And I go to Home, and I go to Changes, and I can put in here, if you notice, this is the one that's changing. It indicates which file is changing right now. The one that's changing is class.cs, GitHub class.cs, right? And I go in there and then I start typing away. So I make a commit. So I added system.console command, which is wrong, right? And I click a commit. Okay, now the commit that I made isn't synced up with the one that's remote because I haven't done the syncing process right now. The commit that I made is local. And if I go to my tool, which I just downloaded, look, it says unsync changes. Here's my commit. Added system console command, which is wrong. And it says just now, this is when it was done by Tom, and it tells me where in my code it changed. If I click on each of these commits, right, it tells me all the files that I added, what did I do, and which ones changed. So this green area here is are the things that I've added. If you notice, there's little pluses next to here, okay? Because this is wrong. It's not working properly, right? Now I want to sync it. I could do it here. I could sync it here if I wanted to, within my tool, or I can go into Visual Studio and do it here again, which is where I'm going to do it. So I'm going to go Home. I'm going to go to Unsync Commits, right? And I'm going to click Sync. And when I do that, I go back to my online repository here. I'm going to go back. I notice that I have 3 commits now, right? It's syncing up. I'm connected. I'm synchronized with the system that's online. If I go to commit history, it shows me these 3 commits. And here I am inside my tool, which also shows me that I'm synced up. It's my local tool. So I've got my 3 systems, Visual Studio, this local GitHub app that I've downloaded, and the GitHub site that are all synced up. Okay? Let's make a change. Let's remove something. Let's remove this system.console.write and put the write command in there. What's the write command? I want to print the console. Okay, so let's do this together. So I'm going to do console capital C. And if I notice I'm still not getting my code hinting for a reason, I'm just random, right? There's no method, nothing. I'm just putting it inside the class. For me to do something, how do I create a method, the main method? Public, there we go, here we go. Now we have someone thinking. Public, static, and the name of the class which we're creating, which is called the same as the class itself, which is GitHub class, right? Here's my method. I'm going to make the empty constructor, right? Here we are. And inside there, I'll do it again. Here's console.writeLine. Oh, hey, look, now I'm getting all my code hinting. And I'm going to say, hello, GitHub, right? Okay, I did that. Not only did I make a change, I'm adding a change in here, right? But I'm erasing the previous line. If you notice, I took the other one out, and I'm putting this new line in. Okay, let's make a commit now. So here I go to Solution Explorer. I go back to Team Explorer. I go to Home, and I go to Changes. And in my changes, I say updated GitHub class to work properly, right? If I can actually put a P in there, that would be good. All right, and I make a commit. Okay, now I've done that. Now the commit is where? It's local, right? I haven't done my commit. This snapshot hasn't been synced up with the remote yet, right? And here it is. It says in my local tool here, it shows me I've got this unsynced change. And look, I've got a red area here with a minus and this green area here with a bunch of pluses. Why? It's showing me that I removed line 12 and I added a new line 12 in addition to 13, 14, and 15. These are all the changes I made to this commit. Okay, now I'm going to sync up with my GitHub. I'm going to go back to Home. I'm going to go to Unsync Commits, and I'm going to click Sync. This is the easiest way, by the way, if you're a Visual Studio user, to connect and sync with GitHub, right? By the way, you can do all of this stuff with command line, but we don't need to do that. That's unnecessary. Okay, so let's check online and see what happened. So here I am. I go back. I refresh. And if I look at my commits, I have 4 now. And there's where I updated my GitHub class to work properly, right? And if I go back into my repository, I have, here's my class, here's my GitHub class.cs, and I can actually look at it online. Here it is online. I can also change it online. Let's change it online. This is where it gets hairy, right? So don't do this at home, kiddies, right? Kind of thing. Don't hurt yourself. Here's, I'm going to make a change. If you notice, there's a little pen icon here. I'm online now. I'm not in the cloud, I'm saying. I'm not local, all right? I click on this thing, right? And let's say you're a collaborator. And you know what? I've got this console.write line. I want to add another one just to make it safe. I'm going to Control-C, I'm going to space down, and Control-V. And instead of Hello GitHub, I'm going to add a bunch of little plus signs just to decorate it a little bit, like as an underline, right? It's not really doing much. And then down here, if you notice on the system, this is online. I'm doing this stuff, right? It asks me to make a change, right? Now it gives you a suggestion. It says commit changes, update github.cs, GitHub class.cs. I'll accept that as a commit message and click commit changes. Bam, I've committed it. And now when I go back online, right? I go back online to see my repository. Here it is. I've got 5 commits. Hold on, let's take a look at the commits locally to me. What do I show? Well, I show only 4 commits locally. Why? Because I haven't synced up with the remote. Okay, let's go back to my Visual Studio. It also is not synced up with the remote, right? Well, here's what I can do. There's a couple of ways I can sync up with the remote. And I recommend this is the way to do it. If I go to Home, and if I go to Unsync Commits, as an example, and it says there's a couple of actions here. I can click Sync. I can also click Pull. And what Pull does, or fetch, right, is it fetches the changes that I made online, right, manually, before I push anything out. I also can just click the Sync button, which should solve the problem. Because I didn't make any new commits in here. So I sync, and if I do that, it says finalizing merge, and bam, it's here. Right? So there's ways of doing it. Now if I look locally on my repository, I've got this additional line, this plus, and if you notice, somehow I've removed this. I removed this curly brace as well. So I've got 5 commits here locally, and I've got 5 commits remotely. Right, 5 commits. Okay, one more thing before we stop this thing and go back to the PowerPoint. I want to collaborate with somebody else, right? Because I'm working with somebody else. How do I do the collaboration tools? I'm not going to talk about it today. It's going to be for another lesson. But if you're curious and you want to know how to do it, you can go to Settings for your repository, Settings. And on the left, there's going to be a site for options for collaborators. You click there. And in here, you can actually send an email. You have to log in. And you can send an email to a collaborator, or you can ask a collaborator to work with you. I'm going to work with you. What's your GitHub account? Lowercase? Like that?
And then
M-A. See how it comes up? So you're listed. If you've signed up with GitHub, I'm just going to sign up with you, right? And I'm going to add you as a collaborator. Now you're there. Okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to go online with me, right? So go to my account, right? Here I am. So it's my last name, GitHub, forward my last name, and then COMP123 lesson 4. Find me. This is a test. I'm putting you on the spot in front of the whole. You're on YouTube too. Everyone's watching you on YouTube. Let's see if she can do it, right? And the reason why I'm doing this is because let's say I want a collaborator. I want you to change something on my file. I want you to go into my CS file, right? And they're figuring out how to do it now together as a team.
I followed you.
Okay, I don't need you to follow me. I need you to go here, right? Go here, connect with me here, right? And then when you click on the repository, which is right here, you'll get this. Do you see this? Yeah, good. All right, so now what I want you to do is I want you, if you notice, I want you to go into this project file here, right? Click onto it. You're there? Now I want you to click on this GitHub class, right? And I want you to click on this little pen here. And I want you to take this console.writeline and insert it before this one. So I want you to insert it before this hello GitHub. All right? Okay, and on the bottom, when you do that, there's going to be a commit. You can actually accept the commit down there. If you scroll down, yeah, commit your changes. Go ahead. Are you done? Okay. Here's how it looks now after she's done her commit. So I go back. Oh, wait, I have 6 commits. Let's take a look. Whoa, there she is. She's a collaborator now with me on this project. Now I need to sync before I do a commit, a push. And this is the proper workflow. Sync first, not knowing if you're working with somebody else to see if they've made a change to a code, and then do your own little commit. So when you start your work again, let's say you go away, you go to the washroom, you have some food, come back, and then you know you're working with somebody else, and they could have made a commit, right? Before you make your own commit or changes, sync up theirs. Don't even work anymore before you sync up theirs. That's the easiest thing to do. Now there's other ways to merge. I'm not trying to scare you or anything like that. But let's say I know she's been working on the file, or she called me, or she sent me an email saying, just letting you know, I updated the file. I said, okay, no problem. So what do I want to do? I want to do a sync, right? If I click on this and I sync, I push it and I try and merge it, and it says successfully synchronized. Wait a minute. Oh, this is moved. You moved it. Okay, I thought you were just going to add another one, right? But that's fine. So see how her change came into effect. So now when I go up on GitHub, right, I see that not only does she merge, I have 6 commits here. There's the commit history, but even locally here, I've got my 6 commits, and this is her right here locally on my system. So you don't have to know how to do this. Right now, we're only doing our own commits, right? Just get out of this for a second and continue with this little presentation. So this is where you download your stuff for Windows. It's windows.github.com if you want to download your app, right? It's a good little helper app. Again, for Mac, it's mac.github.com where you download your Mac app if you're a Mac user, right? Once you get your GitHub account, which you already have from last week, again, you create a repository, and then, again, you click on this new button next to your site name, and you have to name your repository something that makes sense, right? And then boom, you have a repository. It's really, really quite simple. And then syncing up with Visual Studio, as we said, you create your first project, right? As an example, and you add your solution to source control. You have these options: Team Foundation Version Control and Git. Always choose Git, and then use this selected system when creating any project. Check that as well, so it's always Git, right? And then after you do that, what you're going to do is you're going to make a page. In this particular case, it's HTML. It doesn't matter in your case. It's C#. But what you want to do is you go to Changes, and you add a little commit to your changes, where you add a little, a line, some kind of description of what the commit is, right? And after you do that, you take the link from GitHub that we created, like this repository we created, and what you do is you go back into Visual Studio, right? And you click Unsync Commits, and you go and put your link, your URI for GitHub in here. And then what you do, once you've done that, is refresh your GitHub after it syncs up, and you have your new account and your new repository synced up. So again, multi-stages, but the great thing is you can collaborate with others. Any questions around this? This should cover 99% of what you need to do here in this course, okay? If I was going to create another repository though, let's just, one more thing before we end for this particular video. I want to create another repository just for laughs, right? And I go new repository. Okay, I'm going to create another one. I'm going to call it the same thing as the last one. Let's try. COMP123 lesson 4, right? It says no, I can't do it, right? Because I already have a repository of that name. You can't make a repository with the same name. It won't allow you to. But I could add something like this, right? Part 2, or 2, or X, right? As long as the repository is different enough, you could make a name that's very similar to the other one. Let's use X, all right? Because I got to show you this part too. So I'm using X, and I create a repository, and it's public again. If you make it private, you got to pay, right? And you don't want to initialize the repository with a README. You want to avoid doing that for now, right? Because it messes up your syncing. You have to actually sync up with it first before you do your commit. And there's another little step with Visual Studio which isn't required, right? So I create my repository, and now I get this link here, right? I need to create my repository in order for me to get this link. Well, if you're very careful and read nicely, it says, or you can create a new repository on the command line. Here's the command line. So in Windows, you'd have to actually go on your control panel, right? And the control panel actually in Windows that we're talking about here, not control panel, I mean command prompt, in the Windows system itself. I'm just going to go back over here on the Windows side, and I'm just going to close down my remote app here, right? I'll show you what I'm talking about in 2 seconds. If you notice, it comes with Git shell. When you download and install your little app, it comes with this Git shell. So this is like a regular command prompt, right? But it actually zeroes in on my GitHub account, right? My GitHub local repository. And this is where I can implement these suggested command line commands. Git init to initialize your local repository, right? So I could follow these steps not knowing anything. And I'm not adding a README file, so I don't have to do that. And then when I commit, this is the command structure that I would use. So this is cool. First, I have to kind of, get into the folder that I want to do that with. Okay, and if you notice, when I sync up this remote add, I can add this folder to the remote. So there's a few steps to make if you're doing on the command line side. I'm not going to do it here because it's out of scope for our course. But you could, if you really were interested in doing the command line, the instructions are right here when you create your repository. Okay, I created my repository, but oh man, I didn't want to make this repository. I made a mistake. How do I erase a repository? That's important too. So I go to settings, right? And if you go all the way down, it says danger zone, right? And then it says delete this repository. You click on delete this repository, and then you go in here, and I can actually take the name of the repository here and then paste it in there. Here it is, without any extra stuff. This is all wrong. How about that? How about them apples? Let's try that again. How about just typing it? COMP123 I'm sorry, I'm working with virtual machines here. Lesson 04X, right? If you notice, it becomes, I'm able to click it now. Before, if I took the X away, it's grayed out, right? So I have to type the exact name. I click this, I understand the consequences, delete this damn repository and click it, right? And when I do that, it gone. It gone, baby. Right? And it's gone for good. That means all your code and everything else that's on there is finished. That's why I don't recommend you do that unless you certainly know what you're doing. Okay, so let's take a look. All right, this is my repository for today. So everything's still intact. Any questions around this process? To me, this is one of the most important things you should learn, an ancillary technology that you should know how to use when you're a developer, right? It should be part of your workflow. It should be not something that you use as a dumping ground. Don't use Git by creating your project and then dumping it onto GitHub. That's wrong. You only get 2 marks for that out of 4 in my assignments. The way you get full marks to use Git is to do what I'm doing, to create commits. I do some changes. Okay, this is a good stopping place. I'm going to do a commit. I'm going to sync. Okay, now I'm going to go back, do some changes. Okay, that's good. That's a good milestone. I'm going to commit. I'm going to sync. Okay, do some more changes. I'm going to do a commit. I go back, go to the washroom, come back. I do some more changes. I commit. Oh, I got 2 commits. Now I'm going to sync. I keep doing that over and over again, so it shows that you're working with the tool. Why? Your code is up on GitHub, and worst case scenario, if something goes wrong, you can always pull it back down again. How can I pull it back down? Well, I can clone in desktop. It gives you the option to do that. And I can also download the zip. So I can actually download a zip of my files right here, right? We're not going to talk about multiple branches and merging and all kinds of other topics that you can go on to with Git. Right now it's not important. The most important piece is that you have a couple ways of connecting. Hey, here's one. What if you fork me on GitHub? And I mean that just the way it sounds, fork, right? If you click the fork button if you go to me, right, and you find this repository and you click fork, what happens is this repository becomes part of your repositories, right? So that's another way you can do it. If you want to collaborate with somebody else, you can actually fork a repository instead of you doing it on your own. So let's say we do a lesson and your part doesn't work right. It just doesn't go, right? And you have my lesson and you want to include my stuff. Instead of going to my account all the time, you want to fork the lesson that I have from my account onto yours. You click the fork button and it's yours. As long as it's a public repository, it's yours to have. Okay, so that's another thing you could totally do. Again, questions around this. This is part of your assignment number 1. All it is just keeping track of your files as we go. Again, it's an ancillary technology that it's required. It'll be required for every one of your assignments going forward. And I'll stop there.